And I've auditioned for a lot and haven't got a lot. And then Gran Torino came around where he was talking to me. It was like this little role.
Hey everyone, have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up with a dad who's a Hollywood legend? Picture this, your father's face is on movie posters everywhere, he's winning awards, and his name lights up the world. But for you, life feels like a constant battle to step out of his shadow. That's exactly the story of Scott Eastwood, the son of the one and only Clint Eastwood. This isn't just a tale of fame and glamour, it's a real, raw journey of grit, heartbreak, and finding your own way. So, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's dive into the incredible life of Scott Eastwood. You're not going to want to miss this. Scott Eastwood was born on March 21, 1986, in Monterey, California. His name at birth was Scott Clinton Reeves, not Eastwood.
Why?
Because his arrival wasn't exactly front-page news. His mom, Jacelyn Reeves, was a flight attendant who met Clint Eastwood during one of his many travels in the 1980s. Their relationship was a secret, one that Clint kept quiet while he was publicly with another woman, actress Sondra Locke. Nobody knew about Scott or his younger sister, Catherine, born 2 years later in 1988. It was a hidden chapter of Clint's life, one that only came to light years later during a messy lawsuit. Scott's birth certificate didn't even list Clint as his dad, it just said, "Father declined." Can you imagine what that must have felt like for a kid? Knowing your dad's a superstar, but your existence is a secret? Scott grew up in Carmel by the Sea, a beautiful little town in California where Clint even served as mayor for a bit. But don't picture a fancy Hollywood lifestyle. Scott's childhood wasn't full of red carpets or private jets. His mom raised him and Catherine mostly on her own, living modestly on her flight attendant salary. When Scott was 10, they moved to Hawaii, far from the spotlight. It was like his mom was trying to shield him from the chaos of Clint's world. In Hawaii, Scott lived a normal life, well, as normal as it gets when your dad's a movie star, but nobody really knew. He went to school, made friends, and kept quiet about who his father was. Clint wasn't around much. Scott didn't grow up with a famous last name or a silver spoon. He worked hard, taking construction jobs as a teenager and waiting tables to make ends meet. When Scott decided to chase acting, he didn't want to ride his dad's coattails. He used his mom's last name, Reeves, to avoid being seen as just Clint Eastwood's son. He went to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, earning a communications degree in 2008, all while paying his own way. No trust funds here. He took acting classes, auditioned for tiny roles, and worked odd jobs like bartending and parking cars. Here's the kicker. He auditioned for almost every single one of his dad's movies, and got rejected every time. Even for American Sniper, a huge hit that made over $500 million and got 6 Oscar nominations, Clint said no to his own son. Scott later shared how tough that was. His dad's rule was clear: no handouts, no favors. You earn it. That's a hard lesson when your father's a legend, and you're struggling to get noticed. Scott's early acting gigs were small, almost invisible. In 2006, he got a tiny part in Flags of Our Fathers, a war movie directed by Clint. He was credited as Scott Reeves, and nobody connected the dots. He popped up in low-budget films like Pride and Player 5150, but these weren't blockbusters. Some went straight to video or barely hit theaters. Scott was working hard, but it felt like he was stuck, running in place while his dad was collecting Academy Awards. Can you feel that frustration? Pouring your heart into auditions, taking any role you can get, and still not breaking through? That was Scott's life for years. Growing up wasn't easy in other ways either. Clint Eastwood has 8 kids with 6 different women, and Scott was just one part of that complicated family. His half-siblings include Lori, born in 1954 and adopted out, Kimber from 1964, Kyle and Allison from Clint's first marriage, Francesca from 1993, and Morgan from 1996. Some of these siblings grew up with wealth. Scott and Catherine didn't. Family gatherings weren't exactly warm and fuzzy. Imagine meeting some of your brothers and sisters for the first time as adults. There was love, but also tension, maybe even a little resentment. As a teenager in Hawaii, Scott struggled with anger. He got into fights, even got suspended from school. He knew who his dad was but couldn't talk about it. It was like carrying a secret that made him feel both special and invisible. When Scott was 16, something happened that changed him forever. He made a mistake that still haunts him. He took his 14-year-old sister, Catherine, to a party and left her there alone. He thought it was no big deal, maybe just wanted to hang out with his friends. But when Clint found out, he lost it. He grabbed Scott, pinned him against a wall, and punched him in the face. Then, holding Scott by the throat, Clint said, "You don't ever leave your sister at a party. Ever." It was a moment burned into Scott's memory. Clint wasn't into gentle parenting. In their house, you messed up, you paid for it. That was the Eastwood way. Tough, old school, no excuses. That wasn't the only time Clint's tough love shaped Scott. When Scott was a teenager, he asked his dad for $8,000 to buy a truck. Clint didn't hesitate. He just said, no. Scott had a job, he was earning money, and that was that. Clint's lessons were brutal but clear. Show up on time, work hard, take life seriously. Scott says that's where his hustle came from. If he wanted something, he had to grind for it. No shortcuts, even with a last name like Eastwood. Things started to turn in 2009. Scott landed a role in Invictus, another of Clint's films, this time as Joel Stransky, a rugby player. He used the Eastwood name for the first time, stepping out of the shadows. The movie was about proving yourself under pressure, and that's exactly what Scott was doing. He was 23, hungry, and ready to show the world he was more than just Clint's son. Then, in 2011, he took a big risk, signing on for Texas Chainsaw 3D. It was a horror film, part of a legendary franchise, and he played a deputy named Carl Hartman. Scott hadn't even seen the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He'd only watched the 2003 remake with Jessica Biel. Still, he dove in, filming in Louisiana, hoping it would be his big break. The movie was a hit, grossing $47 million, but it locked him into a 3-film deal. He was still using the name Reeves, trying to prove he wasn't just cashing in on his dad's fame. The real game-changer came in 2014 with Fury, a World War II film starring Brad Pitt. Scott played Sergeant Miles, a young tank crew member. This wasn't a small role. He trained with real 1940 Sherman tanks, went through intense military drills, and held his own alongside Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, and John Bernthal. The cast won a National Board of Review Award for Best Ensemble. Critics started noticing Scott as a real actor, not just Clint's kid. Can you imagine the relief? Years of grinding, and finally, people saw him for his talent. In 2015, Scott took a different path, starring in The Longest Ride, a romantic drama based on a Nicholas Sparks novel. He played Luke Collins, a bull rider who falls in love with a college student. Scott did his own stunts, riding real bulls, which is no small feat. The film was a hit, earning him nominations for Teen Choice Awards, including Breakout Star. Studios started seeing him as a leading man, someone who could carry a movie. That same year, he made a bold move, starring in Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams music video. He played her romantic lead in a steamy 1950s-style love story set in Africa. Some warned him it could hurt his serious actor cred, but Scott didn't care. The video dropped during the MTV VMAs in 2015 and racked up millions of views. Plus, all the proceeds went to wildlife conservation. It was a risk, but it paid off, showing the world Scott wasn't afraid to take chances. But behind the rising fame, Scott was carrying a heavy secret. In 2017, he opened up to GQ Australia about a tragedy that broke his heart. In 2014, his girlfriend, Jewel Brangman, died in a car accident. She was just 26. It wasn't a major crash. Most people would have walked away. But Jewel didn't. She was driving a rented 2001 Honda Civic from San Diego to Los Angeles when she rear-ended another car. The airbag deployed, but it was faulty, part of a massive Takata recall that affected 24 million cars. The airbag's metal canister exploded, sending shrapnel through Jewel's neck, killing her instantly. Scott kept it private for years, not even telling her family. When he finally spoke about it, you could hear the pain in his voice. He said he'd lost friends before, but losing someone he loved so deeply changed him. It made trusting people harder, dating harder. He felt guilt for not reaching out to Jewel's dad, Alexander, who was devastated, losing his only child. Scott admitted he still didn't have the words to face that grief. Through that pain, something else kept Scott grounded: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His friend Paul Walker, the Fast and Furious star, introduced him to it around 2007. Paul wasn't just into it casually, he was obsessed, a brown belt who turned his Hawaii home into a training space. When Paul died in 2013, just 2 weeks shy of earning his black belt, his instructors gave it to him posthumously. Scott took jiu-jitsu seriously, saying it taught him humility. On the mat, it didn't matter who your dad was or how famous you were. You'd win some, you'd lose some, and it kept your ego in check. After Jules' death, jiu-jitsu became more than exercise, it was therapy. It helped Scott process his grief, stay focused, and keep moving forward. He told Joe Rogan it's the ultimate humbling experience, something that reminded him he wasn't untouchable, no matter his last name. In 2017, Scott's career hit new heights. He joined the Fate of the Furious, playing a government agent nicknamed Little Nobody. It was a nod to Paul Walker's legacy, but Scott made the role his own, bringing charm and toughness to a franchise that's earned over $6 billion. The next year, he co-starred in Pacific Rim Uprising, a sci-fi blockbuster with giant robots and monsters. It made $291 million, proving Scott could handle big-budget action. In 2020, he starred in The Outpost, a war film about a brutal Afghanistan battle. Critics loved it, giving it a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. Veterans said it felt real. One reviewer even noted Scott's voice sounded like a young Clint's, especially when he growled, "No, not today." It was a moment where you could feel the weight of his journey, proving he was more than just a name. By 2023, Scott was back in Fast X, holding his own among stars like Vin Diesel and Jason Momoa. His character, Little Nobody, stepped up in a big way, setting the stage for more in the franchise's future. Then, in 2025, he starred in Alarm alongside Sylvester Stallone. It was a high-stakes action flick about ex-spies pulled back into danger. Working with Stallone wasn't just a job, it was like 2 generations of action heroes colliding. The director called it a masterclass. Scott didn't just keep up, he shone. Off-screen, Scott was building something else. In 2019, he co-founded Made Here, a clothing brand with a mission. It wasn't about flashy fashion, it was about making quality basics like t-shirts and socks in American factories, supporting real workers. Scott and his partner, Dane Chapin, were hands-on, obsessing over every detail. They launched with a simple idea: American-made still matters. Each product told the story of the people who made it, from the factory floor to your closet. It was tough, finding suppliers, perfecting designs, but Scott believed in it. He said it was about pride, about showing what America could still do. Made Here isn't just a brand, it's a movement, and Scott's betting big on its future. His relationship with Clint has always been complicated. At 94, Clint's a living legend, one of the last of old Hollywood. Scott treasures the stories his dad shares, wild tales about Frank Sinatra or old movie sets. They're rare, so Scott listens closely. As a kid, he was on the set of Space Cowboys, watching Clint fly a helicopter up the California coast, even letting Scott hold the controls. Those moments showed Scott who his dad really was: focused, fearless, in control. But they didn't come often. Clint was often distant, working around the world, leaving Scott to figure out life mostly on his own. One moment stands out. In 2022, Warner Brothers offered Scott a 3-picture deal, including Suicide Squad. It was the kind of offer actors dream of: big money, big exposure. But Scott wasn't sure. The contract didn't feel right, and they weren't offering fair pay. He went to Clint for advice. His dad didn't push or preach. He just said, if it feels right, do it. If not, don't. Scott walked away. That choice showed how much he'd learned from Clint, not just about hard work, but about trusting your gut. Now, at 39, Scott's career is soaring. He's got Regretting You coming out on October 24, 2025, based on a Colleen Hoover novel. It's a heavy drama about a family torn apart by a car accident, with Allison Williams and Dave Franco. Then there's Stolen Girl, where he plays a man helping a mother, played by Kate Beckinsale, find her kidnapped child. It's based on a true story, shot in Italy, and dives into war zones and betrayal. He's also filming Lucky Strike, a World War II story set during the Battle of the Bulge, and Wind River, the next chapter, a dark crime drama about murders on a Native American reservation. These aren't just roles, they're stories that matter, and Scott's ready to carry them. Hollywood hasn't been easy. Scott once called it a circus, and he wasn't joking. By 35, he was so burned out he thought about quitting to become a firefighter. He was making more money bartending than acting. $30,000 to $40,000 a year, barely enough to survive in Los Angeles. The constant rejection, the instability, it all weighed on him. Now, as he nears his 40s, he's thinking about the future. He doesn't have kids yet, but he wants them. He worries about being away from them, about the toll of an actor's life. But through it all, jiu-jitsu keeps him steady. Paul Walker's gift from years ago is still saving him, giving him a place to let go of ego and find peace. Scott Eastwood's story isn't just about fame or a famous last name. It's about a kid who grew up in the shadows, fought for his own light, and learned to stand tall. From secret beginnings to global blockbusters, from heartbreak to healing, he's carved his own path. And he's not done yet. If this story moved you, if it made you cheer for Scott or feel his pain, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more stories about real people chasing their dreams. Let's keep the conversation going. What's your favorite Scott Eastwood moment? Drop it in the comments below.